So we have our core range, these 5 beers, but we also do 2 seasonals every year. One for the summer and one for the winter, and we're well into the winter one at this stage. Now the winter one, we don't have the same sort of story as Grunt and Hop On, and the other ones are very much Fingal, sort of North Dublin based stories. Our seasonals, well, our summer one has a guy in a deck chair, and in the winter he's still on the deck chair. It's just dark and it's raining. And somebody asked me, he looks a bit grey, somebody asked me, is he dead? He's not dead, he's just still on the beach in the winter. But this one does, as it happened, have a really interesting story in terms of the actual brewing. Let's get a glass. So, back at the end of the summer, Jongh was contacted by a farmer near Ashburn, not too far from here, to see would we be interested in using emmer wheat. And I think Jean said, "What's emmer wheat?" And she asked me, and I said, "What's emmer wheat?" I thought I'd heard of it, but I wasn't sure. And this guy, his name is Dominic, and he has a farm called Cornstown House, and he is really interested in heritage grains, so like stuff, oats and barley and wheats and strange things that were grown, you know, in antiquity, but also like 50, 100 years ago, the sort of things they would have made bread and beer with in the 19th century. He's into all this, and emmer wheat is one of these things. It's an ancient form of wheat. It's back 10,000 years ago when they first domesticated crops in the Middle East. It was one of the first things that was domesticated. And so he's growing these. He's also growing spelt and einkorn, which are both ancient forms of wheat. And so I thought, well, it would be really cool to use it. And he said, "Can you use it?" Jean wanted to see, could we do something with it? And I thought, yeah, let's put it in a beer. You know, it's going to probably behave more or less like wheat, but maybe with a bit more flavor. And it was coming towards winter. I couldn't do any of the classic kind of wheat beer things, like Grunt is a wheat beer, you know, but it's something you might not want to drink so much of in the winter. And we had already decided we wanted to do a stout this year, so I thought, well, you can put wheat in a stout.
And it was not malted either.
It wasn't malted, so you can use unmalted grain in beer, but you can't use that much of it. You can use maybe 20% max, maybe a little bit more, because for technical reasons, malted barley, malted wheat has enzymes in it that help to break down the sugar to things that the yeast can ferment. And they have surplus, so you can use, they've enough to ferment the other unmalted grains, but not too many of them. So we were kind of confined to using about, I think we ended up using about 10% or so of this grain bill is the emmer, unmalted emmer wheat. So I went to Cornstown House to meet Dominic, amazing guy.
And it's a fabulous place.
It's a fabulous place.
If you don't come on a brewery tour here, or you have small kids, go to Cornstown House.
Yeah, they have animals that you can kind of, you know, they've llamas you can pet and all this sort of stuff. But he was in the middle of a field when I went out there, and there was an archaeologist from UCD who explained all about emmer wheat to me, because she was out visiting too, because she's really interested in this stuff. And he was in a 1970s combine harvester, which he and his friends had restored as a labour of love, and he was trying to harvest oats and wheat at the time and pulling levers, and he asked me did I want to go on it, and I foolishly said no, and I'm kicking myself now because I'll never get another go to drive a combine harvester. So anyway, long story short, we got the emmer wheat from him, and we brewed a number of batches now with it, and it's gone down really well. So it's kind of, as you can see, it's a fairly straightforward stout, other than the strange ingredient, which to me, I think wheat tends to ferment a little bit more than barley, and leave a little less residual flavour. So the effect of that is that it dries out the beer, which makes it more drinkable. So it's quite a drinkable stout. But being emmer wheat, it's supposed to be, you know, it's hard to tell in isolation unless we had 2 beers that were brewed the same except for the emmer wheat. But it's supposed to be a little bit fruitier, a little bit nuttier, and there's definitely a lot of flavours going on. Now, a lot of that is from the dark malts, like the one that I showed you earlier down in the brewery. But you can see it's got a bit of a creamy sort of head. It's not nitrogenated or anything like Guinness, but it's
Yeah, so
naturally,
we can't really do the beautiful
Yeah.
creamy head that Guinness do so well. And by the way, we love Guinness as well. But from a flavour point of view, if you like the real flavour of stout, oh my God, you get so much more out of a stout
so you get like
from us or from any craft beer company
Yeah.
compared to a pint of Guinness or
you get a
or
whole
a
lot
pint
more.
of Island's Edge.
Yeah, you get a whole lot more roasted flavors, chocolate, coffee, and there's no chocolate or coffee in this beer. It's just natural flavors from the way that the malts are roasted.
Yeah.
I've
Beautiful.
been so delighted with this, and we've got a lot of really great feedback. There's a lot of our customers, in the shops and the off licenses, using expletives and asking Des why the F is this not on all the time and all this sort of stuff.
Yeah.
A lot of people have been really fond of this, so that's really gratifying. And actually, that's one of the nice things about, because I mean, we're doing okay, but you don't go into craft brewing for the money. Like, you go into it for the glory, and part of the glory is when you get really good feedback on the beer, and this one's just done well for us.
And it's nice, with the seasonals, we get an opportunity to brew a different beer every summer or every winter. But with the success of this stout now, we'll probably keep the stout theme going. Like in the past, we've had a coffee stout where we would have added espresso coffee, and we had an espresso machine here in the brewery, and we made I think it was 750 espressos that we put into the beer in order to give it that real coffee flavour.
Delighted to say that was before my time. I didn't have to make any espressos.
Yeah, we also did a flat white stout, which was coffee, and then we added a bit of lactose in it as well. It wasn't white, it was still black. But you can do wonderful things with stouts, and you can also make them very strong.
Yeah.
Like a 7 or 8% stout is also really nice. This is just 5%, and as Richie said, the flavours out of it are fantastic, and it's a wonderful after dinner drink or drink in front of the fireplace.
But it's drinkable as well. I think a lot of people see stout as heavy or thick, or and I think a lot of that is just a perception, because especially the lower strength stouts, I find them very drinkable as long as there's not too much sweetness, as long as they're balanced. And this one, I don't make any bones about the fact that I don't particularly like sweet beers. I like them to be bitter. I usually get rolled back by the others in the brewery when I try and make something too bitter, and I realise not everybody likes it as much. But this one, I think, has a good balance. It's not too sweet, so you don't feel it being too full. You can definitely drink it, like a normal beer, which is nice in the winter.
Just roll back on the grain. We think we took a shot of, once the grain, we've taken all the sugars out of the grain, it becomes spent grain, and for a brewery like ours, which is basically in Dublin city centre, it's very difficult to get rid of waste like grain. Yeah, I'd say 80% of breweries in Ireland, if not 90% of breweries in Ireland, are out in the countryside and near farms and everything. And the best place to get rid of your spent grain is to bring it to a farm, because cattle love it. But if you're based here in the middle of Dublin and you have a container full of grain there every month or every week or every couple of weeks,
at this stage,
it can become very expensive to get rid of that. So we found, thank God, we found a farmer who actually runs a very large hardware store here in Baldoyle, and he has a farm, and he's only too delighted to pick up our grain every week and feed it to his cattle, and his cattle love it. And and there's even, like Paul, our brewer, said, if cattle eat brewer's grain, their methane output is less than when they eat normal feed. So it's really good for the environment as well.
Yeah, there's a lot of really interesting research being done into that sort of thing, into additives, into animal feed that will reduce their, because obviously in the meat industry, the methane kind of thing is a massive environmental issue. And I read another thing about seaweed, a similar thing. But the brewer's grain, that was an interesting one. So obviously they don't just eat the grain. I think that's too much for them, and there's probably still a lot of sugar in there. It's not good for them, but it gets mixed in with the rest of their feed, and and it has this nice consequences, as well as being sustainable, that we're getting rid of it in a sustainable way.
Sustainability is important for us. We were very lucky when we bought the brewery. The brewery has a couple of features in it that make it more sustainable than a lot of older breweries. Most breweries have a heat exchanger when the wort goes to the fermenter and it's cooled down and we regain hot water. But we also have a heat exchanger between on our kettle. So when we boil the beer, the steam is collected, it's condensed into hot water, it's run through a heat exchanger, and we collect up to 1,000 litres of hot water into our hot water tank. It basically means that we produce all our own hot water, and we use a lot of it. You know, unfortunately, to make 1 litre of beer, you might use 7 or 8 litres of water, and most of that is used for cleaning and cleaning and cleaning again. You know, they say that a head brewer, you know, with all his, you know, kind of, I can make beautiful beers, he can do that, I can do that. But essentially, he's a really good cleaner. And sorry, Richie.
I'm the exception to the rule.
But cleaning, like in any food plant, cleaning is so important, and we do a lot of it. At the moment we're working on a project to put solar panels on the roof, and unfortunately, with the high energy prices, that's an easy, commercially justifiable project. But we like the idea as well because it adds to our sustainability. All our grain, all our malted barley, 80% of it is base malt. Comes from a field out in Wexford on Hook Head. So again, we like to buy as many of our ingredients locally, but as we said, we can only get the hops in Oregon, which makes it very unsustainable, but it's supposedly a sustainable farm. So we do what we can, and we can't do everything, and a brewery by its nature does use energy, but we try to keep that as low as possible. Anyway, shall we move on to one more beer before we wrap this up? Besides our core range, of which we had 2 beers, we have our seasonals. We also do limited editions, and limited editions really are there to show off. Because we only do 1 batch of beer, it is commercially a difficult proposition because we have to design a label, we have to make the beer, we have to market the beer, we have to give out samples, and all that is extra marketing cost that we normally don't have. But it's very important. It's also important for the brewers because they like to brew something different every now and then. It gives us a chance to try different styles. If one of them does really well, we might decide to make it a core beer, or we might decide to make it a seasonal beer. So the last limited edition that we did was a Gose, and Richie is going to tell you exactly what a Gose is.
Gose is one of these interesting anomalies in German brewing. You probably hear a lot about the Reinheitsgebot, the German brewing purity law, that they're only allowed to use, it's not beer unless it only has barley and yeast and malt yeast and malt and hops and water. There are a few exceptions to the rule on historical grounds, and Gose is one of them. It's a really old style before this law would have come in, and it's from the town of Leipzig, or near Leipzig anyway. Now it had almost completely died out before it was one of these things that was kind of resurrected by the craft industry, because in craft beer, unfortunately, one of the things that we're kind of beholden to is the fact that people just want new stuff all the time, new. And if you can find if you can discover, I'm still waiting for you to discover some Dutch style that nobody's heard of. If you can discover some style that nobody's heard of and then brew it, then it's great. So people realized that 100 years ago they were brewing this beer in Leipzig that was really old, and I think with the Iron Curtain and everything, it had completely died out, and they resurrected it. Essentially, it is a sour beer made with salt. So it's crazy. I mean, it blows your mind if you think that this is a German beer.
So salt is the ingredient that's not part of the Reinheitsgebot.
Well, also it's got this it traditionally would have been brewed with a lactic bacteria, which a lot of our sour beers, that's a standard method for now, but it's not traditional for Germans. A lactic bacteria which gives you this lactic acid that really makes it sour in a kind of yogurt sour, lemon sour sort of way. So it's kind of naturally soured that way. They add salt to the boil, which is really interesting when you add salt to beer, because salt, we think of salt a certain way, but actually it also accentuates sweetness. It's fascinating. And then a lot of them would also have had coriander added, which is standard for some of the Belgian beers and things like that, but it's a bit far out for the Germans. So it's really one of these very weird historical anomalies, and it's gotten quite popular. A lot of brewers now would make it as a base beer and then add fruit puree, which would, I've seen lime ones, I've seen raspberry ones. I think we did a raspberry one on a small scale, but we decided to do a fairly straight kind of, unadulterated, no fruit, just the kind of close to the historical sort of style. And this actually, interestingly, this kind of started life as a small beer that we did for the craft beer community, which is kind of an online sort of beer portal thing. And it did very well for them, and we thought, you know what, we should do this again on a big scale for a limited edition. The great thing about sour beers is they're so unlike normal beers. They're like closer to something between a dry white wine or a dry cider. Some of the northern French ciders are really almost sour as well. Yeah. Like natural wines are kind of sour. It's more like that. There's no hops in this. The flavor is all kind of sourness, like sour jelly.
It's great. We often get people that come on a tour with a group of friends, and one of them will say, I don't like beer. And I'm kind of go, geez, come to a brewery tour and you don't like beer, but that's okay, that's okay. But we always give them we give them a taste of the grunt, and we give them a taste of this beer. And very often, because this is so unlike normal beer, they'll taste this and say, that's actually
and it's nice to have we can't really justify a year-round sour beer, but it's a beautiful thing to have in your food arsenal. If you have a sour beer, there's so many great food pairings to go with this, and such as and you get this sort of thing in Belgium. They have a lot of sour beers there. If you pair any sort of sour beer like this with fat, sour, acid and fat are classic. That's a classic pairing. So you want to pair this with like charcuterie, pork belly, any sort of fatty terrine, anything like that, any kind of meaty fatty thing, and it's perfect. Because the acid really cuts through that kind of, when you eat that kind of charcuterie, it can kind of coat your mouth a little bit. The acid cuts straight through it. It's a really great pairing. So get yourself some pork belly, or get a really good
and a couple of cans of Gose.
And you're set. Get a nice charcuterie board, even some cheese.
Never mind the Alsace wines.
Exactly. No, they're perfect for that. So yeah, this one's great for that. It's lovely to have a sour beer in the brewery.
Yeah, I agree. And it's nice to have that range of beer. I mean, the 4 beers we've tasted now, they are completely different and miles apart. And that's what craft, people ask, what is craft beer? And I kind of, independent and all that kind of, but really what we're doing is we're brewing beers with lots of flavor and lots of different flavors and interesting flavors and interesting beers. Whereas, I'm very sorry, but Heineken is a bland product. It tastes a little bit different in Holland than it does taste here, but it's a bland product, and there isn't much flavour to it. That's also why it appeals to a lot of people. But craft beers have lots of flavour and lots of interesting flavours, and there's always something different to taste.
And also, I think one of the nice things about, it is a difficult one to see, like what does craft mean? It can't just be about size, it can't just be about independence, it can't be about.
It's about all that as well, but
sure. There's no easy way to define it, but one, I think, important thing which you can use to define it is, up to a point. Now, Vim will probably kill me for saying this because I'm not. You can go out on a limb a little bit, not financially, to a certain degree, you can try something that you're not entirely sure is gonna work. Whereas I know if I was running a multi-million kind of euro massive brewery that was producing thousands and thousands and of liters of beer every day, I would want to be damn sure that something was going to work before I put pen to paper and signed off on it.
Of course, because you're going to sell so much
Exactly.
of it. Yeah,
And
we
the
can do with our
tiniest
limited editions. We'll produce whatever, a
we're not
couple of
just-
pallets of it, and
we won't do something crazy, and of course we'll listen to Des and Tom and see what they think about are they going to be able to sell it.
Yeah,
We're not going to be completely oblivious to it, but at the same time we can say, I think this is going to work, and or let's try a stout. I can think,
and still, and having said all that, they won't brew a Belgian triple for me, and I would love a really nice Belgian triple, and they just keep it. I won't sell in Ireland, and I think I would drink most of it myself, but
I think we need to start.
Unfortunately, we keep going back to whatever IPAs and
we need to start a campaign.
Sours and all that kind of stuff.
We can start a campaign and get the people to demand it, and then we'll have to brew it.
People start demanding a triple or a double, that would be great.
Yeah.
So the only thing about this beer, it's a German beer, and unfortunately, I love German beers. Germans are very good at making beer. They're also very good at soccer and at football, and I still hate them for it. But anyway, cheers.
Cheers.
Thank you very much.